He had it all: money, power, a skyline penthouse that touched the clouds. But what happens when a billionaire loses everything, including the use of his own legs? And then out of nowhere, a little homeless girl shows up and looks him straight in the eye and says, "I can make Daddy walk again." Who was she? Why did she call him Daddy? And what secret from his past did she unknowingly carry in her small, trembling hands? As fire, betrayal, and love collide, a man who thought his life was over begins to fight for something he never even knew he needed: a second chance at family. But can love heal what ambition destroyed? Can a man who's forgotten how to feel remember how to be a father? This is not just a story about walking again. It's about rising after you've already hit the ground. If this touched something in your heart already, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Get ready, because this story is about to take you somewhere you didn't expect. Mickey D. Let's begin. The rain tapped gently against the tall glass windows of the Coltec Tower, whispering a rhythm too soft to compete with the sterile hum of fluorescent lights overhead. From the 39th floor, the city of Portland stretched wide beneath the gray sky, its wet streets reflecting headlights and neon signs like streaks of memory on glass. Inside a corner office that overlooked it all, Ethan Cole sat in silence. The man was still, statuesque almost, save for the quiet rustle of paper as he turned a page in the quarterly earnings report. His body, once athletic and full of motion, now rested in a custom-built wheelchair, its sleek carbon frame a cold replacement for the legs that had carried him through mountain hikes, boardroom takeovers, and all-night brainstorms in his 20s. He was 52 now, the founder of Coltec, a company once built on radical innovation and daring idealism. Now, its visionary CEO was regarded as little more than a figurehead, a man who hadn't stood on his own 2 feet or in front of his board in almost 3 years. He blinked at the numbers. Revenue up, expenses stable, growth slow but steady. He couldn't feel any of it. A small envelope lay unopened beside the report. The return address said Geneva. It was the 3rd letter this year from a Swiss neurology institute that specialized in spinal nerve regeneration. And just like the other 2, it began with the words, "We regret to inform you." Ethan exhaled sharply through his nose. Regret. Such a convenient word. It covered everything, didn't it? The car crash, the paralysis, the promises broken, the people lost, the time wasted. His intercom crackled. "Miss Cole? Doctor, Green is here for your tenna." Ethan didn't respond. "Mr. Cole." "I'm busy," he replied flatly, reaching for the envelope and crumpling it without opening. "Should I reschedule?" "No." "Cancel. For good." There was a pause. The click of the line cutting off was louder than it should have been. A few minutes passed in sterile quiet. Then came the sound of the office doors swinging open, firm, unapologetic footsteps against the polished floor. "I thought I said to cancel," Ethan muttered, without looking up. "I heard you," said a warm baritone voice. "I'm ignoring you. Dr. Noah Green. Tall, lean, wearing a windbreaker and rain-soaked sneakers. Walked in like he owned the place. He was Ethan's physical therapist, or had been, until Ethan had ghosted the last 5 sessions. "I don't have time for this," Ethan said, wheeling backward toward his desk. "I'm reviewing reports. You're reviewing nothing. You're stalling." Noah moved behind the chair and placed his hands on the backrest. "You've made 0 progress in 6 months. I've made peace with that." "No," Noah said calmly. "You've made peace with giving up." Ethan clenched the wheels under his fingers. "Don't push me, Noah." "I'm not pushing. I'm dragging. He angled the chair away from the desk and started rolling Ethan toward the door. Don't you dare. You can fire me later. Noah, stop. I mean it. But Noah was already moving down the hallway. Employees turned their heads as the company's founder rolled past, not by his own will. A few lowered their eyes. Others just stared. No one said anything. I will have you thrown out of this building, Ethan said through gritted teeth. Go ahead, Noah replied. But after we're done with today's session, they were approaching the elevators when it happened. A small voice, clear and confident, called out from beside the reception desk. Excuse me, sir. The two men turned. Standing there was a little girl, thin, damp from the rain, maybe 9 years old. Her oversized hoodie was torn at the sleeves, her jeans muddied at the knees. She clutched a paper lunch bag to her chest like it held treasure. Her sneakers squeaked softly on the marble floor. I can make Daddy walk again, she said. No one moved. Ethan's hand slipped from the wheels. His entire body went still. What did you just say? He whispered. The girl walked slowly toward him, her eyes light hazel, with golden flecks locked onto his without fear. I said, I can make you walk again. Daddy. The world tilted. The air in the lobby thinned to a vacuum. The fluorescent lights above hummed too loud. Ethan's heart pounded with a sharp, erratic rhythm. What? Did you call me Daddy? She said it like it was the most natural thing in the world. My name's Rosie Harper. Mama told me about you. She said you used to be the kindest man she ever knew. She said when I got big enough, I should come find you. Noah stepped back, wide-eyed. Ethan just stared. Rosie reached into her paper bag and pulled out a creased photograph. She said to give you this. With trembling hands, Ethan took the photo. In it, a younger version of himself was laughing beside a woman with auburn hair and bright, open eyes. Her name crashed into his memory like a wave. Leah, the woman he'd met years ago, an artist working part-time at a gallery where he'd donated a sculpture. Their time together had been brief, complicated, heartfelt, but lost in the noise of a rising empire. She never told me, he murmured. You were busy building something, Rosie said softly. She didn't want to get in the way. But she said, if something ever happened and I needed help, I should tell you the truth. Ethan's fingers closed around the photograph. The girl, the eyes, the shape of her jaw. She wasn't lying. Where's your mother now? He asked, his voice barely audible. In the hospital. Since last week, Rosie replied. She's really sick. The doctor said she needs surgery, but we don't have money. She looked down. I thought maybe if I found you, you'd want to help. Ethan didn't answer. He couldn't. Noah gently touched his shoulder. Ethan. He looked up slowly, his expression unreadable. Cancel everything, he said. We're going to Providence General. The hospital was too bright. Ethan hadn't realized until they wheeled him through the front entrance of Providence General. But the lights inside hospitals were always too harsh. It made people look washed out, made fear easier to see on faces. He hated it. Rosie walked beside his wheelchair, her steps quick, her little hand brushing his armrest now and then, like she needed to make sure he was real. She hadn't said much during the ride over. She'd stared out the window of the town car with wide, thoughtful eyes, watching Portland blur past in streaks of gray and red and green. Now, in the polished linoleum maze of hospital hallways, she spoke again. She's in the cardiac wing, Rosie said quietly. Room 409. Doctor. Noah Green trailed behind them, having insisted on coming along. He was unusually silent, processing what had just happened like a man trying to make sense of the sky suddenly turning purple. The elevator ride was slow. Every floor they passed seemed to press a new kind of weight into Ethan's chest. Rosie kept glancing up at him, like she could feel his tension. "She told me a lot about you," she said suddenly. "Mama, she said you were strong, that you built things, that you made the world better with your ideas." Ethan looked at her. "That was a long time ago. She said time doesn't change who people really are. It just makes them forget." He didn't have a reply for that. He wasn't even sure she was wrong. When the elevator opened, Rosie led the way. She walked like someone who knew the layout of this hospital better than any child should. Past the nurse's station, past the vending machine with the broken B6 button, past a painted mural of sea turtles and coral reefs trying to make the place feel less like fear and more like hope. "She's in here," Rosie said, stopping in front of a door cracked open just enough to reveal the corner of a hospital bed. Inside, a monitor beeped softly. The figure in the bed was still pale, a tangle of wires and tubes and machines keeping rhythm with a fragile pulse. Leah Harper looked nothing like the woman from the photograph. Her hair had thinned, her skin was grayish, but her profile, her lips, Ethan's breath caught in his throat. Rosie didn't hesitate. She climbed onto the chair beside the bed, took her mother's hand, and gave it a little shake. "Mama, I brought him." Leah's eyes fluttered open slowly. For a moment, confusion clouded her expression. Then, when her gaze settled on Ethan, something shifted. It wasn't shock. It was something deeper, like regret resurfacing through layers of acceptance. "Ethan," she whispered. Her voice was raspy, a ghost of the woman he remembered. But the moment she spoke his name, it hit him hard. She knew exactly who he was, and she hadn't expected to see him ever again. What are you doing here, Rosie?" he said quietly. "She found me." Leah turned her head to look at her daughter, who gave her a proud, little smile. "I told him," Rosie said. "I told him the truth." Leah closed her eyes for a moment, breathing slowly. "I didn't want this," she whispered. "Not like this." "What did you want?" Leah Ethan asked. His voice was tight. "To disappear forever. I wanted to protect her," Leah replied, opening her eyes again. "I tried to tell you, years ago, but you were already gone." "No," Ethan said. "I was still in Portland. You were gone in every way that mattered." There was no venom in her voice, just weariness, honesty. Ethan looked at Rosie, who was now fiddling with the string of her hoodie, pretending not to listen. "I don't know what to say," he muttered. Leah let out a breath. "There's nothing to say. We're here now. That's all that matters." For a while, the room was quiet, except for the machines. Then Rosie spoke again. "The doctor said Mama's heart isn't working right. Something about a valve, but we can't afford the surgery." Ethan looked at Leah, who turned her head away, as if the shame was worse than the sickness. "It's not just money," she said. "They said I'd need a specialist, a good one. I don't have time to wait. How long? A few weeks. Maybe less." Ethan's fingers gripped the wheels of his chair. "How much too much?" "I didn't ask that." Leah blinked. "They said around 180,000. With travel and prep, maybe 200. Ethan nodded once, already pulling his phone from his jacket. "Consider it done." "Ethan." "No." His voice was low, firm. "I left you behind once. I didn't even know I left her behind, too. That will not happen again." Rosie reached out and gently placed her hand on his arm. "I knew you'd come." Ethan looked down at her, eyes stinging. "Why? Because I prayed for it. And Mama said when you pray for something really big, and if it's about love, not stuff God hears it better." Her words landed with quiet finality. There was something about this child, her clarity, her lack of bitterness, her impossible hope that made Ethan feel like she could see the things in him, even he had forgotten. Later that night, back in his penthouse, Ethan sat in silence at his kitchen table. He didn't touch his dinner. He didn't respond to emails or calls. He stared at the photo Rosie had given him, creased, water-stained, and more valuable than anything else in the apartment. His fingers hovered over the edges of it, like they might absorb something from the image. He tried to remember the last time someone had said they believed in him. Not his investors, not his board, not his doctors, not even himself. No. The only person who had said those words and meant them was a little girl who had grown up without him, a little girl who thought he could walk again. Ethan wheeled himself to the floor-to-ceiling window and looked down at the glittering city below. His reflection stared back at him from the glass, fragmented by raindrops. A man broken by loss, a man unsure of how to start being a father. He closed his eyes. Somewhere, deep inside, he felt something shift. Not a miracle, just the first glimmer of wanting one. The rain hadn't let up for 2 days. From the wide glass windows of the hospital's family lounge, the gray Portland skyline blurred under streaks of water. The city looked quieter in the rain, as if it, too, were holding its breath. Ethan sat in a low chair beside the window, watching the raindrops race each other down the glass. Beside him, Rosie was curled into a seat twice her size, coloring a page from a notebook with soft, sweeping motions. She was filling in a sun with a golden crayon, humming quietly under her breath. Her humming wasn't quite in tune, but it was peaceful, so completely unbothered by the gravity of where they were. Her mother was undergoing pre-op evaluations and a battery of scans just down the hall, while Ethan sat with the child he hadn't even known existed until yesterday. He hadn't touched his coffee. He kept looking at Rosie in short, quiet glances, as if afraid that seeing her too clearly might make her vanish. She suddenly looked up from her drawing. "Did you love Mama?" she asked. The question came out of nowhere. Not accusing, not sad, just curious, like she was piecing together a puzzle that had been missing too many parts. Ethan cleared his throat. The words didn't come easily. "Yes," he said finally. "I did. But you didn't stay." He exhaled slowly. The window was fogging up at the edges. "No, I didn't. Did you know she was going to have me?" He shook his head. "No, I didn't know. Would you have stayed if you did?" He looked at her then. Really looked. Her eyes were too wise for 9. They were the kind of eyes that belonged to someone who had watched people come and go too often, who had slept in the back of shelters and learned how to stretch peanut butter for 3 days. "I want to say yes," he said. "I want to tell you that I would have dropped everything and been there from the start." Rosie waited. "But the truth is, I don't know," he said. "Why not?" Ethan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Because back then, I thought I had to choose between being great and being whole. I thought if I slowed down, if I let anything in, I'd lose my edge. Your edge. My ability to build, to prove something." To who Ethan paused. That question hit harder than it should have. "To people who already forgot about me." Rosie tilted her head. That sounds lonely. It was. They sat in silence for a minute. Then Rosie looked back at her notebook and began coloring again. Mama said you were kind. She said your hands shook when you got nervous and that you always offered to carry her bag, even when it only had sketchbooks inside. Ethan smiled faintly. She remembers that. She remembers everything. She said she loved you more than she meant to. He turned toward the window again. That winter had been cold. He remembered it now. Portland had iced over 1 week, and traffic was a disaster. And he'd spent 3 nights in Leah's tiny apartment above a print shop. She had a kettle that squealed like a wounded bird. He'd hated it. She'd loved it. He remembered watching her sketch for hours, her hand dancing across the page like it knew what it was doing before she did. He remembered the way she always left a little space in the corner of her drawings, like she believed there was always more to add. He remembered the night she came to his office, her eyes full of something she didn't say. She had tried to talk to him. He had waved her off, phone pressed to his ear, mid-call with a European investor. He had told her, "Give me 10 minutes." She had left instead and never came back. Ethan closed his eyes and let the memory sting the way it was supposed to. He hadn't just missed a child's first steps. He had missed the chance to be a different man. The door opened behind them. "Doctor?" Noah Green stepped in, brushing raindrops off his jacket. "They're finishing up Leah's echo scan now," he said gently. "Cardiology thinks she's a strong candidate for the replacement, but we'll need to move fast." "She's strong," Ethan said quietly. Noah gave him a long look. "She's not the only one who is." Ethan glanced toward Rosie. She was humming again. He turned back to Noah. "I feel like I'm 10 years behind and still not ready." "You are. I don't know how to be a father. You're doing it. How by showing up?" That answer didn't seem big enough, but somehow it was. Rosie looked up. "Mr. Noah, yeah, do you think Daddy can walk again?" Noah paused. "I think the human body is full of surprises, and I think your daddy has more left in him than he thinks." Ethan gave him a small glare, but Rosie grinned. "I knew it." She went back to coloring. The next morning came too soon. Ethan sat beside Leah's hospital bed while the nurses prepped her for surgery. Her hair was pulled back, her skin pale, but her eyes were focused. "Are you sure about this?" she asked. "You need it," Ethan said, "and I can help." That's not what I meant. Are you sure about stepping back into all of this?" He nodded. "I'm sure. You don't owe us anything." "Ethan, that's where you're wrong." She studied him for a long moment. "I was angry," she said softly, "when you didn't call back. When I stood in your office waiting for you to hang up that call. You never did. I remember. I wanted you to chase me. I thought, if I left, you'd come after me. I didn't even know you were gone until 2 days later." "I know." Ethan swallowed hard. "I would have married you," he said. Leah blinked. "I would have tried," he said again. "If I'd known, if I'd listened." She reached over and placed her hand over his. "Maybe we weren't ready then, but maybe now. You're not the only one who wants a second chance." The door opened. A nurse stepped in. "We're ready for her." Rosie stood by the doorway, clutching her notebook to her chest. "You're going to be okay. Mama, I know." "Baby," Leah said, her voice trembling. "Daddy's here." Ethan held her hand until they rolled her away. Then, in the quiet that followed, Rosie took his hand and whispered, We believe together now. That's stronger than one person alone. And for the first time in years, Ethan believed it too. The hospital walls were quiet when they wheeled Leah into surgery. Ethan sat with Rosie in the small family lounge down the hall, a room filled with soft vinyl chairs, a muted television showing a morning cooking show, and an old coffee machine humming in the corner. The smell of disinfectant mixed with burnt decaf. Outside, the sky was still gray, but the rain had eased to a light mist, hanging like breath on glass. Rosie sat cross-legged on one of the chairs, her little body bundled up in her too-big hoodie. Her fingers fidgeted with the strings of it, and the coloring notebook was tucked under her arm like a diary. Ethan glanced over at her and saw how hard she was trying to be strong. She didn't cry. She didn't complain. But her shoulders stayed stiff and her legs bounced slightly, a quiet rhythm of worry she probably didn't even notice. He rolled closer. "You okay?" She looked up, nodded once, then shrugged. "Kinda? I know it's a lot. Will Mama wake up fast?" "She's in good hands." "Are you scared?" Ethan hesitated. "Yes," he said. "I am." She didn't seem surprised. "Me too." He reached for the thermos of coffee on the side table. It had gone cold. He set it down again. Rosie took a deep breath. She said this might happen. Mama. What did she say? She told me if she ever got real sick, I should go find you, that you are still my dad, even if you didn't know it, that I shouldn't be mad at you. Ethan blinked. She said that, and she said that people change, but love remembers. He stared at the floor for a moment. His throat tightened in a way he didn't expect. Rosie continued, She told me not to be afraid to believe in good things, even when people say they're not real, like miracles. Ethan leaned back in his chair and exhaled slowly. I used to believe in miracles, he said. Why did you stop? He looked at her, her earnest eyes looking too deep for her age. Because one didn't come when I needed it most. Rosie nodded slowly. Was it the accident? Yes. You couldn't walk anymore. I couldn't do a lot of things anymore. She thought about that. Did it make your heart stop working too? He paused. In a way, yeah. I guess it did. She opened her notebook and flipped to a page. It was a sketch of 3 stick figures. One tall man, one woman with long hair, and one little girl. They were holding hands under a yellow sun. The girl in the middle was smiling the biggest. This is us, she said softly. When Mama gets better. Ethan felt his chest ache. There was no grand gesture in her words, just truth, just hope, the kind he hadn't known how to carry for a very long time. He looked at the drawing again. I want that, he whispered. I know. They sat together quietly for a while. Outside the window, the mist was lifting, leaving behind that strange fresh scent that only came after rain. Noah arrived an hour later, holding 2 smoothies, 1 strawberry, 1 green, and a folder in his other hand. I figured you 2 could use a break from vending machine snacks. Rosie perked up. Does the green one have spinach? It has a little, but I promise it tastes like banana. She took it anyway, sipping it carefully. Noah turned to Ethan. I got a call from the surgeon's coordinator. They started the procedure 20 minutes ago. They're expecting it to take about 4 hours. Ethan nodded. She's strong. She is. But Ethan, can I ask you something? Go ahead. What happens after what? After the surgery. After Leah recovers. After you and Rosie leave this hospital and go home. Ethan looked out the window. I don't know. You need to start knowing. Ethan ran his hand through his hair. I haven't thought that far ahead. Well, start. Because she has. And Rosie definitely has. Rosie looked up from her smoothie. I want to stay with you, she said plainly. The words stopped him. I know I didn't come from your house. And I don't have your last name yet. But I want to. Ethan felt something in his chest shift again. A soft click, like a lock unturning. Rosie, he began, but she held up a hand. It's okay if you're scared. Mama says all dads are, even the good ones. Ethan chuckled, then looked over at Noah. Are all dads scared? Noah smiled. The honest ones are. Later, when Rosie dozed off on the couch with her head on Ethan's lap, he opened the folder Noah had brought. Inside were documents, therapy notes, old charts, a few emails. What's all this? Ethan asked. Options, Noah said. I know you've been through every top clinic and nothing helped, but there's something different now. Ethan raised an eyebrow. There's a program, neuromuscular retraining, not a miracle pill, but it's new and aggressive. It only works if the patient wants it badly enough to hurt a little every day. Ethan looked down at Rosie, her little fist curled beside her cheek. He remembered how she said, I can make you walk again. And for the first time, he wondered if that was ever really the point. Maybe it wasn't about walking. Maybe it was about being the man she needed him to be. I'll try, Ethan said. Noah looked at him. You sure I'm tired of waiting for miracles? I'm ready to make one. A soft knock on the glass startled them both. A nurse stepped in. She smiled. She's in recovery. The surgeon says everything went perfectly. Ethan's head dropped back in relief. Rosie stirred, blinking sleepily. Is Mama okay? Ethan smiled. She's going to be just fine. Rosie sat up straight. Can we see her? Soon? She nodded. I want to draw her a picture first. Of all of us. As she opened her notebook again and reached for her crayon, Ethan watched her with a heart that was no longer quiet. It was beating, louder than it had in years. It started with a twitch, just a flicker. A whisper of movement along the inside of Ethan's thigh that might have been his imagination. But it wasn't. He was gripping the parallel bars in the physical therapy room on the hospital's second floor, sweat beading along his temples, arms trembling from exertion. Rosie sat cross-legged nearby on a foam mat, watching him with quiet intensity. Dr. Noah Green stood at his side, clipboard in hand, eyes narrowed in focused attention. I felt something, Ethan said. Noah leaned down, pressing gently on the muscle just above Ethan's knee. Here Ethan closed his eyes. Concentrated. Yes, he whispered. Right there. That's real, Noah murmured. Try to do it again. Ethan inhaled deeply and centered himself. For the past 3 years, every therapy session had been the same stretch. Strain, fail. Hope had become something dusty, a word people used around him because they didn't know what else to say. But now something had changed. It wasn't strength yet. It wasn't control, but it was life. Focus on the signal, Noah said. Not the movement. Send it. Tell your leg to fire. Ethan tried again. This time, the twitch was more than a twitch. His left quadriceps contracted visibly beneath the soft fabric of his pants. Just for a second, but it happened. Rosie jumped to her feet. Daddy, you did it. Ethan let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Noah grinned, looking down at the spot. There it is. Neural recruitment. Not imagined. Not reflex. That came from you. Ethan sat back in his chair, chest heaving. It was overwhelming. Not because he believed he was going to walk tomorrow, but because for the first time in years, his body had responded, not out of compliance, but choice. He had chosen to try, to fight. Rosie clapped her hands together and bounced on her toes. "It's working. I told you." Noah crouched beside her. "What do you think made it happen?" She put a finger to her chin like she was thinking very hard. "Because he believes now," she said. Noah looked up at Ethan. She might be right. They ran 2 more drills. Ethan was able to activate 3 muscle groups in total, both quads, and part of his right calf. No weight bearing yet, no movement, but the data was undeniable. His spinal cord was damaged. That hadn't changed. But something inside him had something that could reroute, rebuild, regrow. As they left the therapy room, Ethan noticed a handful of hospital staff watching from the hallway, some whispering, some just wide-eyed. News had a way of traveling fast when the subject was a famous man defying odds. Back in Leah's recovery room, the light was low. She was sleeping, her breathing slow and steady. A monitor beeped calmly beside her. Her hair had been brushed back, and her cheeks had more color than they had yesterday. Rosie ran to the bed and gently took her mother's hand. "I made you a picture, Mama, of our family." Leah didn't stir, but her fingers twitched. Ethan approached slowly, still catching his breath from the therapy. Noah lingered near the door, giving them space. "You okay?" Ethan whispered. "She's stronger than she looks," Noah replied. "Vitals are excellent. Best we've seen all day." Ethan looked at Leah, this woman who had once carried his child into the world without telling him, who had struggled quietly, worked late nights cleaning offices, walked Rosie to school through rainy streets, and made peanut butter sandwiches last 3 days. He had built a company from scratch, but she had built a child from love. He wasn't sure which was more impressive. Rosie was still talking softly to her mother, updating her on everything she had missed while asleep, what she ate, what colors she used in her drawing, the way Daddy's leg moved like a hiccup. Ethan watched her with quiet awe. She belonged here, in this room. She belonged to someone, to him. Later that night, Ethan found himself standing not fully upright, but upright enough between the bars again. Rosie was asleep on a folding cot beside Leah's bed. Noah had left an hour ago, leaving a clipboard of new exercises and a note that said, "Only if you're ready." He wasn't ready. He did it anyway. He didn't tell anyone what it felt like when his legs fired again, or how his muscles shook under the weight of years unused. He didn't explain the kind of rage that boiled in him, rage at himself, at time, at the things he'd lost by not believing sooner. But with each attempt, each twitch, that rage softened into something else. Resolve. The next morning, he woke up in the hospital lounge to the smell of oatmeal and overripe bananas. Rosie had convinced a nurse to let her raid the staff kitchen. She held out a paper cup with a plastic spoon and smiled like she had just delivered breakfast to royalty. "Hospital oatmeal is mushy," she announced, "but it has cinnamon today." Ethan took the cup and smiled. "Thanks, Chef." She pulled her chair next to him and began nibbling on a banana. "Are you going to try walking again today?" He nodded. "Every day, until I can't anymore." Rosie leaned her head against his arm. "I'm glad I found you." Ethan looked down at her, startled by how easily that sentence opened his heart. "I'm glad you did too." A nurse appeared at the lounge entrance. "Mr. Cole, there's someone here to see you." Ethan furrowed his brow. "Who?" The nurse hesitated. "She said her name is Claudia Vale." Ethan's jaw tensed. He hadn't heard that name in a long time. Claudia had been his father's closest advisor. After the accident, she'd stepped in to run Coltech when Ethan stepped back. She was brilliant, cold, ruthless. She never asked for permission, and she never liked surprises. He wheeled into the visitor's room, where Claudia stood by the window, arms folded, face unreadable. She turned slowly. "Well," she said, voice crisp, "it's true. You're upright." Ethan didn't respond. Claudia looked him up and down. "I have to admit, I didn't expect this. But I've learned not to underestimate ego. This isn't about ego." "No. Then what is it about redemption? Or just guilt in a new suit?" Ethan remained calm. "Why are you here?" She smiled. It was polite, sharp, dangerous. "You've approved several large transfers this week. Specialists, consultants, therapy programs, no board review, no financial oversight. That's uncharacteristic." Ethan didn't blink. "It's my money. And the company's reputation. I'm helping the mother of my child survive." Alleged child. Ethan's hands clenched the wheels of his chair. Claudia stepped closer. "Don't make me the enemy here. Ethan, I've protected your company while you've been licking your wounds in penthouses and therapy rooms. But if you start making irrational decisions, I'll have no choice." Ethan's voice was ice. "If you came to threaten me, you can leave now." Claudia raised an eyebrow. "I didn't come to threaten. I came to warn. Don't let feelings undo what discipline built, or someone else will take control for you." She walked toward the door, paused, and turned back. "Be careful. Ethan, love makes smart men stupid." After she left, Ethan sat in silence. Rosie peeked into the room, sensing the tension. "Is something wrong?" He looked at her and forced a smile. "No," he said quietly. "Not yet." But he knew that was about to change. 2 days passed. Leah's recovery progressed steadily. Her color was returning. The swelling around her incision had gone down. And though her voice was still weak, her spirit had begun to shine through again. The nurses liked her. They said she smiled even when no one was watching. Said she apologized to the IV pole when she bumped it. Rosie was never far. She sat beside her mother's bed each day, feeding her spoonfuls of hospital soup, whispering stories, doodling on paper napkins. She drew pictures of Ethan, too, sometimes with crutches, sometimes with wings. The hospital room had become a strange sort of sanctuary, a place where the broken were beginning to believe in their repair. But outside those walls, something else was stirring. Ethan received the call just after 7 a.m. His lawyer, Harper Lane, was already speaking when he picked up. "You need to come in." Ethan rubbed his eyes. It's early. "Harper, this can't wait." He sat up straighter in the hospital's family suite, still dressed from the night before. "Claudia, yes. And no. It's not just her. It's the board. She's called an emergency review. They want to strip your executive powers, call it temporary conservatorship, under Corporate Recovery Clause 6B. Ethan's jaw tightened. "I'm not incapacitated." She claims emotional compromise. That you're making erratic decisions transferring personal funds through company platforms, rehiring unauthorized personnel, and refusing to attend quarterly strategy briefings. I've been in the hospital. They don't care. There was a pause. "She's doing this because of Rosie," Ethan said. "Yes." Ethan stood and wheeled toward the window. Outside, the sky was gold with sunrise. For once, it wasn't raining. "She's not just trying to take my company," he murmured. "She's trying to take my daughter." Back at Coltech, the boardroom smelled like polished wood and power. 12 chairs around the oval table. 10 of them filled. Men and women in tailored suits looked up as Ethan entered, pushed by a young assistant. His posture was straight, his gaze level. Claudia stood by the whiteboard, arms folded. "Mr. Cole," she said coolly, "thank you for making time. I own the time." Ethan replied, "Let's not pretend otherwise." Murmurs buzzed across the table. Harper Lane entered and took her place beside Ethan. Her suit was impeccable, her folder thick with rebuttals. Claudia wasted no time. "As acting executive chair," she began, "I've initiated a vote to temporarily suspend Mr. Cole's unilateral decision-making authority in light of concerning behavior that may jeopardize the company's financial health and public image." She clicked a remote. Charts flashed onto the screen behind her. "Since Mr. Cole's reappearance," she continued, "he's diverted over $250 into unvetted programs, signed contracts without committee oversight, and refused access to fiscal records." She clicked again. "In addition, rumors have begun circulating in the media suggesting Mr. Cole has fathered a child out of wedlock and is funneling company funds into private care for a woman with no legal relationship to this firm." Ethan raised a hand. "Is that all?" Claudia smiled faintly. "For now." Ethan looked around the room. "I was in a car accident 3 years ago," he said. "I lost the use of my legs. And for a long time, I believed that was the worst thing that ever happened to me." He paused. "I was wrong. The worst thing wasn't losing my legs. It was losing my purpose." He glanced at Harper. She gave a small nod. "I created this company," Ethan said, "from a folding table in my apartment, from ramen noodles and broken sleep, and for 10 years, I gave it everything. But I forgot to live outside its walls. I forgot the reason I started in the first place." He leaned forward. "That little girl you're all whispering about, she's my daughter. I didn't know she existed until last week. Her mother never asked me for a dime. She just tried to survive. Now she's sick, and our daughter came to find me." A silence fell over the room. Ethan looked around again. "So yes," he said, "I've diverted money, my money, not yours, and I'll keep doing it, if it means saving her life. If that makes me unfit to lead, then I'll step down right now." Claudia opened her mouth to respond, but another board member, an older man named Beckett, raised his hand. "I remember when you pitched this company in a garage," he said quietly. "You weren't wearing a suit then, just jeans and a hoodie and too much caffeine. You said, 'I want to make something that matters.'" He looked at Claudia, then back at Ethan. "I think you still do." The vote was held. It was close, but Ethan retained control by a margin of 1. Claudia didn't argue. She only gathered her files and left, but her eyes said it wasn't over. Back at the hospital, Leah had been moved to a recovery suite with windows overlooking the east side of the city. The light made everything look warmer. Ethan entered the room, and Rosie lit up. "You're back? Did you win?" He knelt beside her. "Kind of. I didn't lose." She beamed. "That's still good." Leah stirred in the bed, smiling at them both. "You look tired," she murmured. "I am. Still handsome, though." He laughed softly. "I almost lost everything today. But you didn't." "No." Rosie tugged at his sleeve. "Can I show you something?" "Of course." She pulled out a paper envelope and handed it to him. Inside was a piece of folded construction paper. On it, drawn in her bright, messy strokes, was a picture of Ethan standing with both legs straight, holding her hand. Above them was a heart. Inside it was one word: family. Ethan stared at it for a long moment. Rosie tilted her head. Is it okay? He pulled her into his arms and held her close. It's perfect. Leah watched them quietly. Her eyes were glassy. Outside the window, the sun broke fully through the clouds. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan Cole didn't feel like a man fighting for control. He felt like a father learning to love. The letter came 2 days after the board vote. It was delivered in a manila envelope to Ethan's hospital suite, handed off by a quiet courier who didn't meet his eyes. Inside, there was a single sheet of paper printed with cold, clinical language. Notice of emergency custody petition filed by Claudia Vale. Petitioner claims Ethan Cole is unfit for parental custody of minor child, Rosie Harper, citing physical disability, emotional instability, and potential exploitation of child for personal legacy preservation. Ethan read it twice, then a third time. By the fourth time, his hands were trembling. Claudia wasn't just angry, she was declaring war. Rosie was sitting on the couch a few feet away, her feet swinging just above the floor. She worked on a new drawing. She glanced up, noticed the shift in his face. Daddy. He quickly folded the paper. It's nothing important. She tilted her head. You're a bad liar. He smiled softly. I know. He handed the envelope to Harper Lane later that morning. She scanned it quickly, her expression hardening. She's clever, Harper said. She's not claiming guardianship for herself, just triggering a temporary review to stall your custody claim. If you're under legal scrutiny, the adoption petition you filed can't proceed. She's trying to buy time. Harper nodded. And paint a picture. One where you're reckless, unstable, emotionally compromised. Ethan exhaled sharply. When's the hearing? 4 days. He looked over at Rosie, now laughing with one of the nurses down the hall. She's not a pawn, he said. She's my daughter. Harper's voice softened. Then we'll make them see that. The next 4 days passed in a blur of paperwork, therapy, and stolen moments of peace. Leah continued to regain her strength. Rosie stayed close to both of them, drawing, reading, humming little songs while she cleaned Leah's glasses or fetched Ethan's water bottle. But beneath the stillness, pressure built. Ethan practiced walking every morning assisted, shaky, slow, but it was progress. 1 step, 2 steps, then 5, supported by parallel bars and determination. He refused to show pain in front of Rosie, but Noah saw it. Every time, you're pushing past what's expected, Noah said one morning. But if you burn out, you lose ground. Ethan paused mid-step. I'm not doing this just to walk, he said. I'm doing it to stand beside her in court. Noah didn't argue. By the time the hearing arrived, Ethan had regained enough balance to stand briefly without assistance. It was exhausting, but he was ready. The courtroom was modest. Wood-paneled walls, muted lighting. A judge's bench raised slightly above a U-shaped counsel table. The air smelled like old paper and worn leather. Judge Ramos sat at the bench, middle-aged, calm-eyed, and known for being thorough. He began the hearing without ceremony. Harper opened with quiet conviction. My client, Mr. Ethan Cole, recently discovered he has a 9-year-old daughter, Rosie Harper. Since learning this, he has taken full responsibility providing medical care for Rosie's mother, establishing a stable environment, and initiating adoption proceedings. The opposition claims he is unfit. We intend to prove otherwise. Claudia's attorney stood next. Our concern is not financial. Mr. Cole is wealthy. That's not in dispute. Our concern is emotional. A man recovering from years of depression, disability, and self-imposed isolation cannot suddenly become a stable father. This child is being drawn into a narrative she cannot understand. Ethan didn't flinch. He had expected worse. The first witness was a social worker who had visited the hospital suite unannounced the day before. She took the stand. "In your professional opinion," Harper asked, "is Mr. Cole providing appropriate care for Rosie?" The woman adjusted her glasses. "He's attentive. She's clean, well-fed, supervised. She shows no signs of distress or fear. Did she express a desire to stay with him?" "Yes, repeatedly." "Did you observe any emotional imbalance or instability in Mr. Cole?" "No." Harper nodded. "No further questions." Claudia's lawyer stepped in. "Did Mr. Cole mention his physical limitations?" "He was open about them." "Do you believe those limitations could prevent him from performing essential parental duties?" The social worker hesitated. "In some scenarios, yes. But he has support systems in place." "Do you believe the child understands his condition fully?" "She's a very perceptive girl." "That's not an answer. She understands enough." The judge made a note. When it was Ethan's turn to speak, he stood slowly from his chair. There was a cane beside him, unused for now, but present. Harper placed a hand on his back briefly, then stepped aside. Ethan faced the judge. "I'm not perfect," he began. 3 years ago, I lost everything I thought defined me. But what I've learned is that being broken doesn't disqualify you from being a father. It teaches you what it means to fight for something real." He paused, hands shaking slightly. "I didn't ask for this child. But now that I have her in my life, I would do anything to keep her safe. Not because I need redemption, but because she deserves a father who sees her." The room was quiet. Then Rosie raised her hand. The judge blinked. "Miss Harper." Rosie stood from the back bench. "Can I say something?" Claudia's lawyer stood. "Your Honor." The judge held up a hand. "I'll allow it, if she's willing." Rosie walked to the center of the room. Her small frame looked almost lost between the tables. She clutched a folded piece of paper in her hands. "I wrote this," she said, unfolding it carefully. "It's short." She cleared her throat. "My name is Rosie. I didn't have a daddy before, but now I do. He listens. He tries. He says sorry when he makes mistakes, and he makes me feel not invisible." Her voice wavered, but stayed strong. "I don't want a different daddy. I just want him." She folded the paper again and turned to sit back down. The judge leaned back in his chair, eyes thoughtful. After a moment, he spoke. "This is a preliminary hearing. No final custody will be decided today. But based on testimony and evidence presented, I see no reason to delay Mr. Cole's guardianship petition. We'll proceed toward a formal adoption review." Ethan let out a slow breath. Leah, seated beside Rosie, touched her daughter's hair. Claudia didn't look back as she left the courtroom, but Ethan didn't need to see her face to know. She was already planning her next move. The hospital gym was nearly empty when Ethan stepped into it that morning. It was early, just after 6. The fluorescent lights flickered as they warmed up, casting pale halos over the machines. A single orderly was mopping in the far corner. No noise, no distractions, just space. Ethan stood between the parallel bars in the center of the room, hands gripping the rails, the chill of steel grounding him. Rosie was still asleep upstairs. Leah had insisted he go down and stretch before breakfast. Said she liked seeing him walk toward her, not just roll in. He took a breath. Then another. His knees didn't lock. His legs didn't tremble quite as much. His back stayed straighter. It wasn't smooth, but it was happening. He took one step, then another. 4, 5. On the 6th step, His foot caught slightly. He staggered, nearly fell, but caught himself with a hand against the bar. His heart pounded, not from fear, but from the force of something he hadn't felt in years: pride. He looked toward the mirror across the room. The man staring back wasn't just surviving anymore. He was returning. Noah arrived 10 minutes later, holding 2 cups of coffee and looking slightly winded. "You started without me?" Ethan turned toward him, still gripping the bars. Didn't want to wait. Clearly. Noah set the coffee down and walked over, scanning Ethan's stance. "You're more stable?" "I walked 6 steps. Noah raised an eyebrow. "You used to count seconds." "I know." They stood in silence for a beat. Noah pulled out a clipboard and flipped through it. "I want to introduce resistance today. Just a little rubber band work, maybe light ankle weights." Ethan nodded. "Let's make it hurt." It did hurt, but not in the way it used to. This wasn't the kind of pain that whispered hopelessness. This pain was purpose. Fire being drawn from an old matchstick. It meant his body was still trying, still willing to serve him if he'd only meet it halfway. They trained for an hour. When Ethan returned to Leah's room, she was sitting up in bed, her sketchbook open on her lap. Rosie was braiding a section of her mother's hair, humming as she worked. "You look flushed," Leah said, smiling at him. "I walked," he said. 6 steps, maybe 7. Leah's eyes brightened. "Without help. Mostly." Rosie gasped. "You're getting faster. I'm getting closer." She jumped off the bed and ran to him, arms outstretched. He bent slightly and lifted her into a one-armed hug. She wrapped around him like sunlight. "We should celebrate," she said, "like a real celebration. What do you have in mind?" She paused. "Chocolate milk and pancakes." Leah laughed, then winced as her stitches reminded her they still existed. Ethan leaned over and kissed her forehead. "You okay?" "Better every day." He sat beside her bed, watching her sketch. She was drawing a garden this time: wide arches, stone benches, lilies climbing trellises. "That's beautiful," he said. She shrugged. "It's where I go in my head when the beeping gets too loud." Rosie glanced at the page. "You should make a real one." Leah tilted her head. "A real garden?" "Yeah, with Daddy and me. When you're better." Ethan looked at Leah. She looked back. There was something between them, old, familiar, but reawakened in new light. A promise not made, but forming. Outside, clouds parted for a moment, letting a slice of sunlight into the room. Later that afternoon, Ethan met with Harper Lane in the hospital cafe. She had her laptop open, fingers moving quickly. "I've reviewed Claudia's financial challenge," she said. "She's trying to build a case for corporate negligence, but she's running out of ground. You've made too much progress. Public sentiment is shifting in your favor. She won't back off." "No," Harper said, "but she's not your biggest problem anymore." Ethan tensed. "What do you mean she's poking around child services? Digging into Rosie's past school records, medical history, emergency shelter logs. If she finds any gaps or vulnerabilities, she'll use them." Ethan's jaw clenched. "How soon?" "Soon. I filed a request for protective sealing, but if she spins the right narrative, she could frame Rosie's past as neglect. She was living with Leah, in shelters, because I didn't know. She'll say it doesn't matter." Ethan sat back. His heart was racing again, but this time with fury. Not panic, not despair, just a quiet, burning resolve. He stood slowly. "I'll protect them," he said. "I know," Harper replied. "But to do that, you'll have to face something." "What yourself?" That night, He stood at the window of his penthouse apartment. Leah had been cleared to go home within the week. Rosie had already packed her backpack twice. She wanted to move in right away. He watched the city flicker beneath him, headlights tracing patterns across bridges, tiny people with huge problems going about their nights. He thought about the man he used to be, the one who spent nights in silence, surrounded by glass and chrome and cold light, who told himself loneliness was just the price of ambition. He thought about Leah and the way she smiled through pain, about Rosie and how she never stopped believing in joy, even when the world told her not to. He closed his eyes. He didn't want to be the man who watched life happen anymore. He wanted to be in it, with them. When he returned to the hospital the next morning, he walked into Leah's room unassisted. No cane, no bars, just slow, deliberate steps. Rosie screamed with delight. "You're walking." Leah's eyes filled with tears. Ethan reached the edge of her bed and sat down slowly. "I told you," Rosie said, crawling onto his lap. "I told you I could make you walk again." He held her tightly. "No," he whispered. "You made me want to." Leah reached for his hand. Outside, the city carried on, but inside that room, something quiet and extraordinary was unfolding. A miracle, not of movement, but of connection. The beginning of something they all thought they'd lost. A family, beating again, alive again, together. It began with a missed call, then 2, then 27. But by the time Ethan returned to his penthouse after a therapy session, his phone was vibrating so frequently it barely left his palm. Notifications flooded the screen, emails from department heads, texts from board members, news alerts from media outlets he hadn't spoken to in years. Coltech was trending, and not in the way he wanted. He tapped on a headline. Then another. Breaking CEO Ethan Cole, accused of financial misconduct. Whistleblower claims personal funds used to influence adoption case. He froze. The air around him seemed to thin, as if the room had been quietly vacuumed of oxygen. He scrolled through the article. Anonymous sources, leaked documents falsified. If his memory was right, private information, twisted just enough to sound believable. He sat down slowly on the edge of the sofa, the phone still glowing in his hand. It didn't take long to figure out who was behind it. Claudia. She'd found her leverage, not in his body, not in the courtroom, but in public perception. And Ethan knew the danger of that battlefield better than anyone. His entire career had been built on trust, on image, on the illusion of control. Now, with a few digital fingerprints, she was dismantling him one headline at a time. Harper Lane arrived at the penthouse within the hour. She was holding a file and a cup of bitter espresso. Her face was unreadable, but Ethan could see it in her eyes. Damage had been done. "They're running with it," she said, setting the file down. "Every outlet, full exposure. Claudia's framing you as a tech mogul, manipulating family courts using private capital to buy emotional narratives." Ethan rubbed his face. "Rosie's name? No. They didn't release hers, but it's only a matter of time. She's a child." Harper nodded. "And Claudia doesn't care. Can we stop it? Legally not fast enough. We could issue a statement, denounce the sources, demand retractions. She'll just double down. She already has. I intercepted a secondary leak. This one includes a doctored email thread suggesting you offered a judge a charitable donation." Ethan stared at her. "I didn't." "I know. I've never even spoken to a judge privately. She's not trying to win in court. She's trying to make sure no one cares if you lose." A long silence passed between them. Ethan stood and walked toward the glass wall, staring down at the city that once bowed to his name. Now it was devouring it. "I built this company with truth," he said, "and now lies might destroy it." Harper stepped closer, then fight with something she doesn't expect. "Like what vulnerability?" He laughed bitterly. "That doesn't sell. It does now." She handed him her phone. On the screen was a short clip, grainy, but familiar. It was security footage from the hospital therapy room. Ethan between the bars, taking 6 steps, and at the end, Rosie running to him, hugging him, laughing. The timestamp in the corner was just 2 days ago. Ethan watched the whole thing, twice. "Where'd you get this, doctor? Green pulled it. Said you'd need it one day." Ethan stared at the screen, the faint flicker of a smile rising at the edge of his mouth. "This isn't proof of innocence," he said. "No," Harper agreed. "It's proof of character." Rosie was in the hospital room when he returned that evening. Leah was asleep, her head turned toward the window, breathing steady and slow. Rosie looked up from her notebook. "Daddy." He sat down beside her. "Hey, kiddo, you okay?" He hesitated. "Not really." She slid her small hand into his. "That's okay. I can believe for both of us." He laughed softly. Then he pulled her close and hugged her for a long time, after she drifted off to sleep. Ethan pulled out his laptop. He opened a blank document. Then he began to write. Not a press release, not a rebuttal, a letter. To the people, to the press, to his employees, to anyone who still cared about the truth. He wrote about failure, about the weight of it, about how losing the use of his legs hadn't been his worst injury, but losing his own heart had been. He wrote about Leah, about the night he let her walk away, about the years of silence, the years of noise, the ache of discovering a daughter after nearly a decade of not knowing she existed. He didn't ask for sympathy. He simply told the story. At the end of it, he added one final line. "Love didn't make me weak. It made me want to walk again." Harper published the letter the next morning through his official site and social channels. By noon, it had been read over 2 million times. By evening, Ethan Walks was trending, not because of scandal, but because people saw something they hadn't seen from him in years. Honesty. And in the shadow of that honesty, Claudia's smear campaign began to unravel. Fact-checkers tore through the leaks. Anonymous sources were traced to shell accounts linked to private contractors. One outlet issued a retraction. Then 2 more followed. She hadn't expected the story to fight back, but it had, and behind it stood Rosie, small and unshakable, drawing crayon hearts in a hospital room, not because someone asked her to, but because she still believed it mattered. Ethan stood beside Leah that evening, watching the news play silently on the mounted screen above her bed. She reached for his hand. "You're not the man I left behind," she whispered. He squeezed her fingers gently. "Good," he said, "because I don't want to be." She smiled, eyes soft. "And yet, you still feel like home." Ethan looked at her, then at Rosie, who had fallen asleep in the window nook again, her sketchbook resting on her chest. He stepped to the window. Outside, the lights of the city blinked like stars. He had survived worse than lies. He had survived himself. Now, he was walking forward, one step, one truth, at a time. It started with a smell. Sharp, acrid, wrong. Ethan was walking Rosie through the second-floor hallway of Coltech's headquarters, showing her the mural the company had installed to mark its 10-year anniversary. Rosie loved the way the light caught the edges of the metal plates, how they shimmered like fish scales when the sun hit them just right. Then she wrinkled her nose. "Do you smell that?" Ethan paused. The scent hit him a moment later. Burnt plastic. Hot wires. Something more. He looked down the hallway. No smoke? Not yet. But he knew that smell. He'd been in enough server rooms, enough late-night hardware tests, to recognize what was coming. He grabbed Rosie's hand. "Stay close. We're leaving. Now." They turned back toward the elevator, but it was already out of order. Red light blinking. The building intercom crackled. "This is security. We're initiating an emergency evacuation. Please proceed to the nearest stairwell and exit the building. This is not a drill." Panic rose in his throat. He scooped Rosie into his arms and moved faster than he thought his legs could carry him. Down the hallway, down the back corridor, past the row of glass offices where he'd once built his empire brick by brick. As they rounded the corner to the stairwell, the first burst of smoke hit them. Thick, black. Rosie coughed, buried her face in his shoulder. Ethan turned and headed back. They needed another way down. The emergency lights had already begun to flash red across the ceiling. Fire alarms howled in bursts. He pulled open the nearest door, an old maintenance stairwell that had been sealed during renovations. But the lock had never been updated. He kicked it hard. Once. Twice. It gave way. "Hold on tight," he said. They started down the narrow stairwell. 1 flight. 2. His legs were screaming. His breath came in ragged pulls, but he kept going. Rosie didn't cry. She clung to him like she believed in him more than the floor beneath them. At the bottom of the stairwell, they burst out into the alley behind the building. Smoke billowed from the lower floors now. Sirens wailed in the distance. Employees streamed from exits, coughing, shouting. Security officers waved people back. Ethan staggered forward, nearly collapsing onto the pavement. Rosie was still in his arms. Then a medic was there, helping them both to a curb. "What floor?" the medic asked. "Second. West Wing." "I think the server room went up." Another voice broke through the chaos. "Sir, we have someone still inside." Ethan turned. "Harper Lane." She was coughing, her blazer smeared with soot, her eyes wide. "Leah," she said. The name slammed into his chest like a hammer. "She came to surprise you. She was waiting in your office." Ethan's heart stopped. His office was on the 4th floor. Rosie heard too. She stood frozen, her small hand gripping his. "Is she—" Rosie started, voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," Harper said. "The fire's moving fast." Ethan looked back at the building. Flames were climbing the windows like angry hands. The fire department hadn't yet breached the upper floors. He looked at Rosie. Then he looked at the stairs. Every part of him said no. But something deeper said, "Go." He turned to the medic. "Watch her," he said, placing Rosie in the woman's arms. "Don't let her go." "Sir, you can't." But he was already running. The pain in his legs was searing now. He pushed through it, through the crowd, through the smoke, through the broken glass of the lobby, up the emergency stairwell. 1 flight, then another. By the time he reached the 4th floor, he was coughing hard, vision blurry. The hallway was filled with smoke. The air was hot enough to blister. He dropped low, crawling. "Leah," he shouted. "Leah, where are you?" A faint sound. To the left. He turned toward it and saw her slumped near his desk, trying to pull herself up. She'd inhaled too much smoke. Her movements were slow, disoriented. "Ethan," she gasped. "No, why are you here?" He reached her, lifted her carefully. "I'm here because you're here. I couldn't leave a note. I wanted it to be a surprise." He smiled, coughing hard. "Well, surprise." They moved slowly, step by step, leaning on each other. The fire was consuming everything around them. The walls groaned, glass cracked. When they reached the stairwell, a ceiling tile collapsed behind them. Ethan wrapped his arm around Leah's waist. "We're getting out of here," he said. How she whispered, one step at a time. The stairwell seemed endless. His legs shook, his breath faltered, but he didn't stop. Not for pain, not for fear, not even when his body begged him to collapse. When they burst out into the alley, firefighters rushed to them immediately. Oxygen masks, blankets, shouts of relief. Rosie ran to them, arms wide. "You did it! You found her!" Ethan knelt slowly on the pavement and held both of them close. Leah in one arm, Rosie in the other. He didn't care about the flames behind him. He didn't care about the headlines waiting to be written. In that moment, all he knew was that they were together, whole, alive. That night, the fire was ruled as arson. Investigators found signs of tampering in the server room. The blaze had been designed to spread quickly, targeted, deliberate. Harper confirmed what Ethan already knew in his bones. Claudia. She hadn't just wanted his company. She wanted to burn his life down. The evidence would take time to process. But the trail was there, enough to call in legal authorities. Still, Ethan didn't celebrate. He sat beside Leah's hospital bed, her hand in his, while Rosie slept curled up in a chair. "You saved me," Leah whispered. "I think we saved each other." She smiled weakly. "You walked into a fire. I walked toward you." Silence settled between them. Then she said, almost too quietly, "Promise me something. Anything. Don't ever run away again. Not from pain, not from love." He nodded. "I won't." She closed her eyes, her hands still in his, and Ethan sat there, listening to her breathe, knowing that for the first time in his life, he wasn't running from the fire. He was coming out of it, brand new. The fire changed everything. In the days that followed, Coltech's headquarters was cordoned off with yellow tape and smoke-stained scaffolding. Workers moved in and out of the building in masks, salvaging what they could. News vans parked outside for nearly a week, chasing rumors of arson, betrayal, and the billionaire CEO who ran into flames to save the woman he loved. But Ethan didn't care about the cameras. He cared about the woman in the hospital bed, the child who refused to leave his side, and the aching in his legs that reminded him every morning he was still standing. The doctors said Leah was lucky. The smoke hadn't reached her lungs too deeply. A few more minutes and it might have been different, but she would recover, slowly, like everything worth keeping. Rosie drew a new picture that week, her mother, Ethan, and herself in a big house with ivy on the walls. Ethan stood in the drawing without his cane, holding Leah's hand. There were sunflowers in the yard. Ethan taped the picture to the window of Leah's hospital room. "Is that what you want?" he asked Rosie gently. She nodded. "It's what I see." Harper Lane came to visit the next morning. Her heels clicked against the floor with less sharpness than usual. She handed Ethan a folder. "It's done," she said. He opened it slowly. Inside were 2 documents, both signed, sealed, finalized. 1. Claudia Vale had been arrested and charged with conspiracy to commit arson, endangerment, corporate sabotage, and evidence tampering. A mountain of proof had come forward: emails, payment records, phone logs, a digital trail she hadn't been careful enough to cover. 2. The adoption. It was official. Rosie was his daughter. Forever. He sat down heavily in the chair beside Leah's bed, unable to say anything at first. His throat tightened. When he looked up at Harper, his voice was hoarse. "She's mine." Harper smiled. She always was. Now the world agrees. He closed the folder and reached for Rosie's hand. She looked up at him, puzzled. "What is it? You're stuck with me now." She blinked. "Like, always, always." He nodded. She let out a little squeal and threw herself into his arms. "Best day ever." Leah laughed from the bed, and even Harper, who rarely showed more emotion than mild irritation, smiled and looked away. Later that day, Ethan took Rosie to a quiet bench on the hospital's rooftop garden. It was small, only a few potted plants and a view of the city skyline, but the air was clear and the sky was soft with clouds. "I was thinking," he said, "about building something new." Rosie perked up. "Like a new house. Maybe that, too. But more than that, a space for people like us. Families who need help. Parents who are trying. Kids who feel invisible." Her brow furrowed. "Like a school. Not just a school. A center. With counselors, teachers, support workers. Programs that actually listen. A place where people aren't judged by what they lost, but by what they're willing to fight for." Rosie tilted her head. "Will there be snacks?" He laughed. "There can be." She smiled. "Then I think it's a good idea." He kissed her forehead. A few days later, Leah was discharged. Ethan brought her home, his home. The penthouse felt different with them there. Warmer. Real. Or Rosie chose the guest room with the window seat. Leah took the bedroom across the hall from Ethan's, though the door between them often stayed open. They ate dinner around a real table. They argued about what movie to watch. Leah painted in the afternoons again, her sketchbooks filling with color. Rosie got her own art supplies too, though most of her drawings still ended up taped to the refrigerator. One evening, after Rosie had gone to sleep, Ethan stood on the balcony with Leah, watching the city. "You don't miss it?" she asked. "Miss what?" "The silence." He shook his head. "Not anymore." She looked at him for a long moment. "You've changed. So have you. You're softer now." He smiled. "I was hard for a long time." She reached for his hand, and yet, somehow, you held on to the best parts. They stood there a while, not needing to speak. In the weeks that followed, the rebuilding continued. Coltech moved into a temporary headquarters. Ethan appointed a new board, one that reflected values beyond quarterly profits. People who had children, people who had been hurt, people who understood what it meant to fail and still show up. He poured funding into the community center project. Leah helped design it. Rosie named it the second step. Because, as she said, the first step gets you moving, but the second is the one that proves you mean it. The groundbreaking ceremony was held in early spring. The sun was out, the air crisp and full of promise. Ethan stood on the podium with Leah and Rosie beside him. He walked to the microphone without his cane. Slowly, but without hesitation. "Today isn't about me," he said. "It's about the people we overlook, the ones we step past on sidewalks, the ones who sweep our floors, raise our children, carry quiet pain in quiet places. This center is for them, for you, for anyone who still believes that it's never too late to stand again." The crowd applauded. Rosie clapped the loudest. Afterward, a reporter approached Ethan as he helped Leah back into the car. "Mr. Cole, some people are calling this your redemption arc. What would you call it?" He thought for a moment, then looked at Leah. then at Rosie. I'd call it my beginning. That night, back at home, they sat on the couch eating popcorn and watching a movie none of them really paid attention to. Rosie fell asleep halfway through. Leah rested her head on Ethan's shoulder. "You're not afraid anymore," she said softly. "No," he replied, "but I was. Of what?" He paused. "Of being seen, of not being enough, of loving too late." She looked up at him, and now he kissed her gently. "Now I know better." They sat in the glow of the screen, the sound low, the world quiet around them. Outside, the city pulsed on. But inside their home, something rare and real had taken root. Not perfection, not a fairy tale, but the kind of peace that comes after fire, and the kind of love that's been earned, one step at a time. The garden didn't look like much at first, just a quiet patch of land behind the new community center, edged by bricks and hope. The soil was uneven, the benches unpainted, the flowers still young. But it was enough. Leah stood at the edge of it one morning, holding a clipboard and squinting into the light. "You're really going through with it here?" she asked. Ethan walked up beside her, hands in his pockets. "Why not?" She raised an eyebrow. "You're one of the richest men in the country. You could have a rooftop wedding in Manhattan, a beach ceremony in Santorini, or rent out an entire vineyard in Napa." He shrugged, but none of those places gave me a second chance. She smiled. Touché. Rosie ran past them, holding a bouquet of mismatched wildflowers she had picked from the side path. "These are for the tables," she shouted. "And I'm putting sunflowers on the cake." Leah looked after her, then turned back to Ethan. "Is this real?" she whispered. "Sometimes it feels like we dreamed it all, that I'm going to wake up in a hospital bed again, and you'll be a name I stopped saying out loud years ago." Ethan took her hand. "It's real," he said. All of it. The wedding was scheduled for late afternoon, just as the sun would begin to dip behind the old trees lining the garden's edge. The small team of volunteers who helped build the second step pitched in to decorate string lights, repurposed chairs, hand-painted signs pointing toward love, laughter, and the future. There were no white doves or ice sculptures, no grand orchestra, just soft jazz from a local trio, and the sound of children laughing as they chased each other through the grass. Leah wore a pale cream dress she designed herself, simple, elegant, with hand-stitched flowers along the hem that matched Rosie's bouquet. Her hair was swept to one side, and her eyes sparkled in the way they only had when she was painting. Ethan wore a tailored navy suit, not the kind he used to wear to board meetings, but one Rosie had picked out with him at a second-hand boutique. It fit perfectly. Rosie stood between them in a light blue dress, her curls bouncing as she adjusted her handmade flower crown for the 10th time. "You look beautiful," Ethan whispered to her. "I know," she said proudly. Leah laughed. "You're raising a confident one. I'm just trying to keep up." The ceremony began under an arch made of driftwood and vines. Dr. Noah Green, of all people, stood officiating. He had agreed only after Ethan begged him with a straight face, and Rosie wrote him a personal letter, titled "Why You Should Be the One Who Says the Words." Noah adjusted his glasses and smiled. "We are not gathered here because everything went right," he began. "We're here because these two people decided to keep showing up when it went wrong." He looked at Ethan, then at Leah. They know the weight of silence, the ache of mistakes, and they know that love isn't something you find. It's something you build, patiently, quietly, one small, honest choice at a time. Ethan's hands trembled slightly as he held Leah's, not from nerves, but from knowing just how far they'd come. Leah read her vows first. "I was angry at you," she said, "for years. Not because you left, but because you didn't look back. I didn't think I'd ever forgive you. But then, life brought us something bigger than our pain. It brought us Rosie. And when I saw the way she looked at you, I saw the man I remembered, the one I fell in love with before fear made us strangers." She paused, her voice shaking. "You don't have to be perfect. You never did. You just have to stay. And I promise I'll meet you there. Every time." Ethan swallowed hard, then spoke. "I used to think strength meant not needing anyone, that asking for help was failure, that love was too dangerous to hold on to. But then a little girl knocked on my heart with crayons and hope, and you let me in again even after everything. I don't want a life where I'm walking alone. I want one where every step I take is toward you." Noah nodded. "By the power vested in me through extremely unofficial means," he said, "and by the power of a little girl's drawing that started all of this, I now pronounce you husband and wife." Rosie grinned so wide she could barely contain it. "You may now kiss the bride," Noah added. They did, soft, steady, and the garden, in all its early bloom, seemed to lean in closer. Later that night, after the cake was eaten and the music faded into soft background chatter, Ethan found a quiet spot near the edge of the garden. Rosie joined him, her dress grass-stained from dancing. "You did good, Daddy," she said, climbing into his lap. "So did you," he whispered. She yawned, resting her head on his shoulder. "Do we get a honeymoon?" He smiled. "Eventually. Can we go to the beach? I want to build sandcastles. Big ones, with windows and towers. We'll go. Maybe we can even fly there. I like that you walk now," she murmured. "I like it too." She closed her eyes. "I knew you could. I knew it before you did." He held her tighter. Leah joined them a few minutes later, her dress slightly wrinkled and her shoes in her hands. "She's out. Fast asleep." Leah sat beside him. "I didn't think we'd ever get here," she said. "We almost didn't. But we did." "Yeah." They sat in the cool night air, their daughter breathing softly between them, the stars blinking slowly to life above. No paparazzi, no scandals, no lawsuits, just the quiet hum of people choosing love. Again and again. Eventually. Ethan stood and carried Rosie inside, tucking her into the little guest bed they decorated with glow-in-the-dark stickers and her favorite stuffed bear. Then he returned to Leah. They danced one last time in the garden. No music, no audience, just the rustle of leaves and the weight of history lifted. "I love you," he said. She leaned her head against his chest. "And I love the man you've become." "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" "For making me believe again." She closed her eyes. "You did that on your own," she said. "I just reminded you how—" The moon was high overhead when they finally went inside. Tomorrow, the world would keep spinning. But for tonight, the story had reached its still beating center. Not an ending, just a beginning. Theirs. Sometimes, the most powerful journeys aren't about reaching the top. They're about falling and finding the courage to stand back up, even when it hurts. Ethan Cole was never meant to be a father, or so the world said. Disabled, broken, a man shaped by numbers and silence. And yet it was the love of one little girl, and the unwavering grace of a woman he once let go, that reminded him being seen doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. Together, They built something no boardroom ever could. A family, a future, a place for the overlooked, the invisible, and the forgotten to be heard. And what about those who tried to destroy them? Let this story be a mirror, a call to look at how we treat people who fall behind, at how we judge based on what's missing, instead of what's trying to heal. Let's never forget love is not a luxury. It's a right, and the smallest voices often carry the deepest truths. If this story moved you, if it made you think or feel a little deeper, please like, share, and subscribe so we can keep bringing you stories that matter. Until next time, stay kind, stay human, and keep walking forward. We'll be here waiting to tell you the next one.